One night stand with the cold alpha before Christmas Eve, now it's more than just a night stand. The city wore Christmas like a second skin. Strings of golden lights wrapped around street lamps, shop windows glowed with wreaths and artificial snow, and carols drifted faintly through the cold night air. Yet for Noel Hart, the season felt unusually quiet, almost hollow. He pulled his coat tighter around himself as snow began to fall in slow, lazy flakes. Christmas Eve was only days away, and everywhere he looked, people walked in pairs, laughing softly, sharing warmth. Noel wasn't jealous. Not exactly. He was just tired. The freelance deadlines. The empty apartment. The unspoken loneliness he pretended didn't bother him. When the wind bit sharply through his scarf, Noel ducked into the nearest bar without thinking. It wasn't loud or crowded, just a small, warmly lit place tucked between two closed shops. The windows were fogged, fairy lights twined along the shelves behind the counter, and the scent of cinnamon and aged wood filled the air. He slipped onto a stool and ordered something warm, letting his shoulders relax for the first time all day. That's when he felt it. A presence. Noel didn't need to turn around to know someone had just entered. The air shifted, subtle, heavy, unmistakable. Alpha. He glanced sideways. The man stood near the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat dusted with snow. His hair was neatly styled, eyes sharp and distant, as if the world rarely impressed him. There was something cold about him, controlled, precise, but not cruel. Just closed. Their eyes met briefly. Noel looked away first, heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. Don't be ridiculous, he told himself. He's just another stranger. But when the bartender served Noel his drink, a deep voice spoke from the seat beside him. Mind if I sit? Noel turned. The alpha was closer now, his presence warming the space despite his reserved expression. No. Go ahead, Noel replied softly. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward. Just unfamiliar. I don't usually come here, the man said finally. Me neither, Noel admitted. Guess the cold chased us both in. The alpha's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile but something close. Seems so. They exchanged names that weren't quite names. Afterus. Safe ones. Noel talked about his illustrations, about how winter always made him feel reflective. The alpha listened, really listened, eyes focused, posture relaxed in a way Noel wouldn't have expected. I'm not very good at small talk, the alpha confessed quietly. That's okay, Noel said. I like quiet. The storm outside worsened. Snow fell heavier, streets disappearing beneath white. When the bartender announced last call due to the weather, neither of them moved to leave. You shouldn't walk home in this, the alpha said almost reluctantly. I have a place nearby. Noel hesitated. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't naive. But something about this man felt steady, like shelter. Just for the night, Noel said, as much to himself as to the alpha. Their night was gentle, warm, unrushed. No promises were made. No futures imagined. As dawn crept in pale and quiet, Noel dressed silently. The alpha stood by the window, back turned as if giving him space, or guarding his own heart. Thank you, Noel said softly. The alpha nodded. Be safe. They parted without exchanging numbers. Without a backward glance. Outside the snow had stopped. Noel walked away believing it was nothing more than a moment, unaware that the cold alpha would soon walk back into his life, and change it forever. Morning arrived too softly. Noel woke to pale winter light slipping through unfamiliar curtains, the city outside muted and still beneath a blanket of snow. For a brief moment he didn't remember where he was, or why his chest felt strangely heavy. Then it came back. The bar. The storm. The alpha. Noel sat up slowly, fingers curling into the sheets. The room smelled faintly of coffee and clean linen, and something else. A lingering warmth that made his pulse stutter. It was just one night, he reminded himself. He dressed quietly, heart pounding louder than his footsteps. The apartment was immaculate, almost impersonal, sleek furniture, minimal decoration. A place built for solitude. At the door Noel paused. There was no note. No message. No expectation. And somehow that hurt more than he thought it would. Across the city, Eryx Blackwood stood motionless before the glass wall of his penthouse office, coffee untouched in his hand. He had slept less than 2 hours. The omega scent still clung to the air, soft, warm, unsettling. Eryx frowned, jaw tightening. He was not careless. Not impulsive. He had spent years mastering distance, control, and emotional restraint. So why? His fingers tightened around the cup. One night, he told himself. A lapse. And yet, the memory of Noel's quiet smile and gentle voice refused to fade. Days passed. Noel tried to return to routine, sketching, deadlines, quiet meals alone. But something inside him felt shifted. He found himself pausing at cafe windows, distracted by passing silhouettes that were too tall, too broad. At night, sleep came slowly. He told himself he was foolish to expect anything more. They hadn't exchanged real names. There were no promises, no claims. Still, his heart hadn't gotten the message. Eryx buried himself in work. Meetings, contracts, endless strategy sessions. But during brief moments of silence, his thoughts drifted, to a soft laugh, to eyes that held warmth without demand, to an Omega who hadn't looked at him with fear or expectation. It unsettled him more than any hostile takeover ever had. His assistant noticed the change. "You seem distracted, sir," she remarked cautiously. Eryx dismissed it with a glance. Yet later, alone again, he found himself staring at the city lights, wondering where Noel was, and why the thought mattered so much. A week later, fate intervened. Noel received an email that made his breath catch, a freelance illustration opportunity with Blackwood Enterprises. The pay was generous, the exposure invaluable. He hesitated only a moment. It's just business, he told himself. Across town, Eryx approved a creative proposal without reading the name, until the file loaded. Noel Hart. The room seemed to still. Eryx leaned back in his chair, eyes darkening, not with regret but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. And beneath it, anticipation. Neither of them knew it yet, but that single night had already woven their lives together, far tighter than either had planned. Noel arrived at Blackwood Enterprises 15 minutes early. The building rose like glass and steel against the winter sky, cold, imposing, untouchable. He stood at the entrance for a moment longer than necessary, steadying his breath. It's just work, he told himself again. Inside, everything was quiet precision. Polished floors, muted colors, people moving with purpose. Noel followed the directions to the upper floors, clutching his portfolio like a shield. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, Noel stepped into the executive level, and straight into a presence that made his heart stop. Tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly tailored suit. The man from that night. His hair was neatly styled, his expression sharp and unreadable, eyes colder than Noel remembered. If not for the way Noel's pulse spiked instantly, he might have convinced himself he was mistaken. But then the Alpha's gaze flicked up, and locked onto him. For a fraction of a second, so brief no one else would notice, something cracked in the Alpha's composure. Recognition. Then the cold returned. "Good morning," the Alpha said evenly, voice professional, distant. "You must be the illustrator." Noel swallowed. "What, yes. Noel Hart." The Alpha nodded once. "Eryx Blackwood. Follow me." No acknowledgement of the night they'd shared. No sign that it had meant anything at all. Noel's chest tightened as he followed Eryx into the boardroom. The meeting passed in a blur. Noel presented his concepts, hands trembling slightly as he flipped through his designs. The executives murmured approval, but Noel's focus kept drifting, to the way Eryx sat at the head of the table, posture immaculate, eyes fixed on the screen, yet never once meeting Noel's gaze. Too distant. Too controlled. When the meeting ended, the room emptied quickly. Noel gathered his things, heart sinking. Of course, he thought bitterly. It really was just one night. "Mr. Hart." Noel froze. "Yes," he replied, turning back. Eryx stood alone now, the door closed behind the others. His expression was still calm, but something unreadable stirred beneath it. "I'd like you to stay on for the full project," Eryx said. "Your work fits our vision." "Thank you," Noel said softly. A pause stretched between them, heavy, charged, unsaid words pressing against the air. Eryx's jaw tightened. "You'll coordinate directly with my office," he added, voice lower. "For efficiency." Noel nodded, though his instincts screamed that efficiency wasn't the reason. After Noel left, Eryx remained where he was. His alpha instincts roared beneath his carefully built restraint. The Omega's presence, his scent, faint but unmistakable, had shaken him more than he was willing to admit. He had recognized Noel instantly. Pretending otherwise had been a calculated decision. Distance is safer, he told himself. For both of us. But as Eryx stared at the closed door, he knew one truth he could no longer deny. That night had not been meaningless. And keeping Noel close, professionally or otherwise, might be the most dangerous choice he had ever made. Noel quickly learned that working directly with Eryx Blackwood meant long hours and very little distance. Emails turned into scheduled calls. Calls became in-person reviews. Review meetings stretched late into the evening as deadlines crept closer and the city outside the glass walls faded into darkness. Eryx was precise, never raising his voice, never wasting words. Yet when Noel explained his ideas, the Alpha listened with an intensity that made Noel's skin prickle. "You understand atmosphere," Eryx said one night, reviewing Noel's latest sketches. "Emotion." Noel smiled faintly. "I draw what I feel." Their eyes met for a moment too long. Eryx looked away first. The office emptied as winter nights grew longer. Sometimes it was just the two of them, surrounded by screens and quiet. Noel began to notice things. How Eryx always made sure he ate during late sessions, ordering food without comment and sliding a plate toward him. How the Alpha adjusted the room temperature when Noel shivered. How his gaze softened, just slightly, when he thought Noel wasn't looking. It confused Noel more than cold distance ever could. If it meant nothing, Noel thought, why does he care? Eryx noticed things too. The way Noel hummed softly while working. The crease between his brows when he concentrated. The warmth he brought into sterile spaces without even trying. Each detail chipped away at Eryx's carefully built restraint. He had spent years avoiding attachment, believing emotions made him weak. Yet with Noel the pull felt inevitable. One evening, Noel laughed quietly at a small mistake in his draft. The sound hit Eryx harder than expected. "You shouldn't stay so late," Eryx said suddenly. "It's snowing again." "I'm almost done," Noel replied. "Besides, I don't really mind." The honesty in his voice made Eryx's chest tighten. The tension finally cracked during a late review. Noel reached across the table to point at a detail on Eryx's screen, his sleeve brushing Eryx's wrist. The contact was brief, accidental. But Eryx felt it like a spark. His alpha instincts surged, sharp and demanding. He pulled his hand back quickly, standing as if distance alone could restore control. "I'll have someone walk you out," he said curtly. Noel blinked, hurt flickering across his face before he masked it. "Right. Of course." As Noel packed up, Eryx turned toward the window, jaw tight. He wanted to reach out. To explain. To say that the restraint wasn't rejection, it was fear. But he said nothing. That night, Noel stood at the bus stop beneath falling snow, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. "I shouldn't hope," he told himself. Still, when he returned home, he found a message waiting on his phone. "Eryx, did you get home safely?" Noel stared at the screen, heart racing. It was a small thing. But small things, he was learning, had the power to blur even the strongest lines. It started subtly. A wave of nausea in the morning. A strange sensitivity to scent. Exhaustion that clung to Noel no matter how early he slept. At first, he blamed the long hours and winter stress. But as days passed, the signs became harder to ignore. Noel sat alone in a small clinic waiting room, hands folded tightly in his lap, heart pounding louder than the ticking clock. Snow tapped gently against the window, indifferent to the storm gathering inside him. When the doctor returned, her expression was calm, but careful. "The results are clear," she said. "You're pregnant." The word echoed. Pregnant. Noel nodded numbly, thanking her before stepping back into the cold air, breath fogging as reality settled in. His legs carried him home, but his thoughts stayed frozen in place. An alpha, his instincts whispered. A cold one. Eryx. That night, Noel sat on his bed, staring at his phone. He typed a message. Deleted it. Typed again. "I need to tell you something." Delete. "Can we talk?" Delete. What would he even say? They weren't together. They weren't even honest with each other. And Eryx, controlled, distant Eryx, had made it painfully clear that emotions were not welcome in his world. Noel wrapped his arms around himself, suddenly feeling very small. Eryx noticed the change immediately. Noel missed 2 scheduled check-ins. His replies became short, distant. The warmth he usually carried into the room dimmed. Something was wrong. Eryx tried to ignore the unease coiling in his chest, but his alpha instincts refused to be silenced. They urged him to protect, to claim, to know. When Noel finally came in for a late review, he looked pale, eyes shadowed, movements slower. "You're unwell," Eryx said quietly, closing the file. "I'm fine," Noel replied too quickly. Eryx stood, closing the distance between them before Noel could step back. He stopped just short, respecting space but close enough that Noel felt the steady weight of his presence. "Don't lie to me," Eryx said. Not harshly. Almost concerned. Noel's breath trembled. I should go, he whispered. Eryx let him. And immediately regretted it. That night, Noel made a decision. He packed his sketchbooks, his clothes, his life into boxes far smaller than the one growing inside him. He couldn't stay, not near Eryx, not where hope could hurt him more. I'll raise this child on my own, he decided. It's safer. But fate was done waiting. Eryx stood alone in his penthouse, staring at a city that felt suddenly too quiet. His instincts screamed that something precious was slipping away. He picked up his phone. Eryx, don't disappear. Noel's phone buzzed in his trembling hand. Tears blurred his vision as he realized one painful truth. The silence between them was no longer protecting either of them, it was breaking them both. Eryx did not wait for a reply. The moment he realized Noel might truly disappear, something inside him fractured, clean, sharp, and irreversible. Control, the foundation of his entire life, suddenly felt useless. He left the penthouse without a coat. Snow bit into his skin as he drove through the quiet streets, memories of Noel's hesitant smile and tired eyes replaying in his mind. His instincts had never misled him before. They were screaming now. Find him. Noel was taping the last box shut when the knock came. Soft, then firmer. His heart leapt into his throat. When he opened the door, Eryx stood there, hair dusted with snow, breath unsteady, eyes dark with something Noel had never seen before. Fear. You weren't answering, Eryx said. I thought. Noel stepped back, letting him in. Silence filled the apartment, broken only by the faint hum of the heater. I didn't want to complicate things, Noel said quietly, staring at the boxes. You made it clear this was just work. Eryx followed his gaze. Understanding struck like a blow. What are you hiding from me? He asked, voice low. Noel's hands trembled as they settled over his stomach. I'm pregnant. The words fell between them, soft, devastating, undeniable. Eryx went very still. For a moment, Noel braced himself for rejection. For cold logic. For distance. Instead, Eryx exhaled shakily and sank into the nearest chair, elbows on his knees. I failed you, he said hoarsely. Not because of this, but because I was afraid. Noel looked up, startled. I don't know how to love, Eryx continued. I was taught control, not warmth. That night, you saw something I never let anyone see. He lifted his gaze, eyes bare. And when I realized how much it mattered, I panicked. Tears slid silently down Noel's cheeks. I wasn't asking for anything, Noel whispered. I just didn't want to be alone. Eryx stood, closing the distance slowly, carefully, like approaching something precious. You won't be, he said. Not if I have any say in it. He did not touch Noel. Not yet. Instead, he bowed his head slightly, a gesture of humility no one had ever seen from him. I want you, Eryx said simply. Not out of obligation. Not because of the child. Because you changed me. Noel's breath hitched. Are you sure? He asked. Eryx nodded. I've never been more certain of anything. For the first time since that snowy night, Eryx let the ice crack, and warmth rushed in. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in quiet snowfall. The city felt softer, streets glowing beneath strings of lights, windows warm with laughter and music. For the first time in weeks, Noel allowed himself to slow down, walking beside Eryx through the softly falling snow. They didn't hold hands. Not yet. But their steps matched, and that felt like something. Eryx stopped in front of a familiar building, the small bar where everything had begun. Its windows glowed amber against the night, just as they had on that stormy evening. I wanted to bring you here, Eryx said, to where it started. Inside, the bar was decorated with pine branches and twinkling lights. The bartender recognized them, or perhaps simply smiled at the way they stood close without touching. They sat in the same place as before. This was the night I stopped believing I could stay untouched, Eryx said quietly. And the night I ran from it. Noel's fingers curled around his mug. I thought you regretted me, Noel admitted. Eryx shook his head. I was afraid of wanting you. The music softened around them, a gentle carol drifting through the air. Eryx stood suddenly, drawing curious glances. He took a breath, then looked directly at Noel, voice steady but filled with emotion. I won't hide you, he said. I won't pretend this is nothing. Noel's eyes widened. In my world, Eryx continued, love is seen as weakness. But tonight I don't care. He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and took Noel's hand. The contact was warm. Certain. Noel's breath caught. You are not a mistake, Eryx said. You are my choice. Snow fell heavier outside as if the world itself paused to listen. Tears slipped down Noel's cheeks as he squeezed Eryx's hand. "I choose you too," Noel whispered. They didn't need anything more than that. When they stepped outside, the city bells began to ring, announcing Christmas Day's approach. Under the glowing lights and falling snow, Eryx leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to Noel's forehead, protective, reverent, real. The cold alpha had made his confession. And nothing would ever be the same again. Winter did not leave all at once. Snow lingered along the edges of sidewalks, melting slowly beneath the returning sun. The city breathed differently now, lighter, quieter, much like the space Noel and Eryx shared. Mornings became gentle. Noel sketched by the window while sunlight filtered through thin curtains, his hand occasionally pausing as he smiled to himself. Eryx learned the rhythm of those mornings, coffee prepared just the way Noel liked it, the calm before the world demanded him again. He no longer rushed away. At work, Eryx remained formidable, respected, untouchable. But when he returned home, the sharp edges softened. He listened more. Laughed, rarely but genuinely. He learned that strength did not fade when shared. Noel learned too. He learned that love did not have to be loud to be real. That protection could feel like presence instead of control. That choosing someone meant allowing yourself to be chosen in return. One afternoon, as snow finally gave way to clear pavement, Eryx knelt beside Noel, resting his hand gently over Noel's stomach. "I used to believe control was everything," he said quietly. "Now I know it was fear." Noel covered Eryx's hand with his own. "And now?" "Now," Eryx replied, meeting his gaze, "I choose warmth." The future unfolded slowly, doctor visits, shared meals, quiet planning. There were no grand announcements, no spectacle. Just commitment built in steady moments. On the anniversary of that first snowy night, they returned to the bar once more. Same lights. Same warmth. This time they arrived together, and left hand in hand. What began as a one-night shelter from the cold had become a life shaped by trust, patience, and love. Some nights fade by morning. But others become forever.